Guys, thank you for that carrier update. We'll get one more before we are done here for the day. Right now, we're going to welcome Omar Singh, President of Surge Transportation, with us today to talk a little bit about some challenges when it comes to implementing Freighttech. So, Omar, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you on the airwaves as always. You just wrote this article for us up on freightwaves.com. Can you talk us through a little bit about what you're writing about?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good to be here again. Sorry it's not in person this time. But yeah, I was writing a little bit about sort of my own experiences and some of the other kind of brokerages, who I work with and friends with and kind of collaborate in TIA about the challenges to picking the right tech, rolling out the right tech, incentivizing the right tech to the team, and some of the actual even failures that I've had kind of trying to roll out different products to see what's going to be successful and what's not. And in many ways, kind of none of them were successful because they're competing, within our own company. But similar to you guys just opened up the nominations for the Freighttech, right? You have a top 100 and then you have a top 25 and kind of, there's so many options out there, and anything from different mileage programs to different load boards, to different TMS systems. And so just picking the right one that's going to work for you, I think it's a much larger task than a lot of people realize or do the diligence for. And, to my own sort of admission, I think some of them I haven't spent enough time, really narrowing down the selection and rolling out what's going to be best for our company. So yeah. I hear lots of people struggle with that.
Yeah, no, they certainly do. Omar, thanks you so much for being on here. And next time we're going to spar a little bit when you come in, so bring your gloves. But a very little bit. We're going to fake the entire thing because I've never boxed professionally and you have. But so in my mind, when you talk about that and trying to pick the right one, you talk about there's this, there's mileage, there's that, there's all these different tech that you want to bring into your company, right? That one that kind of brings those together and integrates everything, that'd be kind of where I'd be throwing my vote at, right? Or that can bring in so that I, as a company, can implement the best of the best in all the little segments, but have them work together. Is that out there? I mean, is that a realistic goal to find that?
I mean, I think it is, but that's sort of, you get your hub, right?
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
In our world, in my world, that's my TMS, right? And a lot of TMSs build integrations with the other, products that are out there. And so I would say, in my own experience, that one hasn't been as challenging. I mean, we use an enterprise level TMS that integrates with a lot of the things that are out there. But then how do we pick from those things? If we go through your list of 100, how many of those are TMSs? I'm guessing at most 10. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked, to count the TMSs. And then so you've got 90 other products that are competing with each other out of that list of top 100. And I think that's been a bigger challenge for us is, our TMS generally will integrate with most of the larger products out there and the established ones. But I know there are a lot of other new TMSs that are competing that have more of kind of an open API connection where they can have faster integrations with the new products that are coming on the market, if that makes any sense. But
it definitely does. When you're a company starting to implement a Freighttech solution in what you're doing, it can be kind of tricky to try on different ones, right? Like I think of it as kind of like the Goldilocks effect. Like this one doesn't do enough of what I want. This one has too many tools that I don't necessarily use. This one is the perfect fit for my business. And as a company, you have to be flexible in trying out those options, right? Do you have any advice for people who are looking at implementing the solution when trying to get the most bang for their buck, trying out different Freighttech solutions and not wasting a ton of time or a ton of money bouncing around from Freighttech to Freighttech to Freighttech?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, one of the challenges is if I have to give advice, it's like put a little bit more time into the research, into the demos, and don't feel that sitting through one demo is then the time where you have to make a decision. Maybe do 2 demos, 3 demos. If you're lucky enough to be geographically, close to where that company is, maybe they can do an on-site visit with the team. So I think probably I felt a little bit rushed, like, okay, now we've done 2 demos, we need to kind of make a decision here, is one of them. And then the other big one I would say is really rolling it out and getting buy-in from your own team. And that's been something that I think I didn't do as well in the past couple of years as I wish I had, because I did some of the research. I could have probably done more in the product, exploration, but the amount of time that I spent with those companies and products to determine which I wanted to try to use, I didn't really also have my team doing that. And then, so I go to them and say, oh, I'm really familiar with this. I think it's going to be helpful, but they weren't. And then, so, without that buy-in for them to adopt it and really get to use it, a struggle to make, a success of those initiatives was certainly that. But also, I think one of the challenges within that is some of those platforms or products need to be integrated into our system in order to really see it at work. And so the investment is upfront, right? So you pay the integration fee, you sign a 1 year, because you're really not going to know how it works in your system until you try it out. So I think there's a little bit of risk there in terms of saying, okay, I've done the research, and I'm really not going to know until I sign up for at least a year or two. So I think it's just part of the game. And we certainly have subscribed to competing products, and then they compete against each other. And I thought we would have a winner that kind of rose up, right, with these different things by having them compete against each other. But really, it sort of made it so that like none of them were that successful yet. So probably go about that differently in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Omar, let me ask you this. A lot of legacy players out there still have their IT departments, and I'm not talking about software, I'm talking about hardware people. They've got server rooms, they've got all these type of things, right? Does that make it easier? Does that make it harder? And if you are one of those legacies that's out there, is it better to migrate to offsite hosted cloud-based?
So we have a legacy on-prem system with an IT guy who does all of our hardware. And yes, I think the big push is to move to cloud-based anything that you can. Anything from the issues that we have with redundancy of internet and IPs changing and, whitelisting, and it's challenging. So I think hopefully roadmap 2023 would be to move all of our systems, into the cloud. And really be able to scale and have a lot more kind of network stability in that respect,
Yeah, in a former life, we went through that. We had on-site servers. We hosted on-site, and bringing on a new TMS, a rather large one we brought in. We decided we were going to host it ourselves, and all it did was delay that from being rolled out because it sucked time out of the normal daily operations, and it also made the rest of our operations much less efficient because you couldn't get to issues and problems and keep the deck of cards standing, right, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, so moving towards cloud-based, definitely look at that, especially if you're a legacy player. What about obsolescence when you're looking at these things? Is there worry about bringing in somebody that's a hub or a TMS, et cetera, that becomes obsolete in 3 to 4 years?
The company that we work with has a release every 6 months. And so I think they're really good about, and you have to pay for the release and the upgrade or the update. And that's just part of the game, I guess. But I think they do a really good job of staying up to date. And we only use one TMS. So I would say if there's anyone out there who's not constantly doing updates and releases, then yeah, the pace at which technology is moving, I think they become obsolete really fast. And we have a large legacy TMS, so once every 6 months I think is reasonable for them. But some of the other products that we're subscribing to that would be in your list of Freighttech 100, they're just doing ongoing releases, all the time. And I think that's necessary just to stay relevant for sure.
Omar, I'm going to put you on the spot with this last question really quickly before we let you go. Is there anyone that you hope to see on the Freighttech 100 list, or anyone that you've seen in the last few years that you think, yes, they are doing consistently great things and we love seeing them excel in the industry?
Oh, this might not be cool, but I'm going to be a little biased here and say search transportation. We're throwing our hat in the ring this year for the first time. We've done a lot with our TMS integrations, with our shipper level TMS integrations and real-time pricing APIs. And so I hope we're going to throw our hat in. Yeah.
Excellent. See, I was going to ask him, which one do you think should be thrown off, but we won't get into that. We'll talk about that one off air.
All right, Omar, thank you for joining us. Great to have your contributions, as always, for us here on FreightWaves Now and on FreightWaves.com. Speaking of FreightWaves.com, let's go check out some of our top stories from this morning.